The New Orleans Saints on Wednesday had a trio of free agents try out for the team. You probably won't recognize any of the names unless if you're like a really diehard like NFL sycophant. But Amari Barno, Jeremiah Martin, Oshane Jimenez all tried out for the New Orleans Saints. And then the team did announce here on Thursday that they have signed Jeremiah Martin. If you're not, I'm going to get to why this is important in a second. Jeremiah Martin played collegiately at Washington and Texas A&M, went undrafted. He's 6'3", 265. He's a defensive end who's bounced around the league a little bit. Cleveland, the Giants, the Packers, actually Cleveland twice. He was with the Arlington Renegades and the Birmingham Stallions in the UFL as well in the Spring League. So he's been around a little bit, but what's really of note there is that he's a defensive end. And this is relevant because he is a similar size and plays the same position as Isaiah Foskey. Now, we have talked a good bit here since Sunday about the injuries that the Saints suffered in that game. Obviously, a couple of offensive linemen with Will Clapp, Trevor Penning, and then Bub Means, with Clapp and Means both going to IR, meaning their seasons are over. So naturally, the Saints were going to add an interior offensive lineman. They may still add a more receiver help, but this one's interesting because they didn't suffer any injuries at defensive end. They're looking for someone to take Isaiah Foskey's spot. Now, they're not going to say that publicly, but the former second-round pick played the most defensive snaps of anybody in the game and didn't record a statistic. So when your former second-round pick, who is very much on the chopping block this year as far as making the roster in entering his third year in the NFL, when you play him the entire preseason game, first preseason game, and he doesn't record a statistic, and then 3 days later you're working out dudes at his position, and then you sign one of them, that's a pretty good indicator the writing's on the wall for Isaiah Foskey. And this is really just bizarre. You know, when you look at the Saints' second-round pick history, the recent history has been pretty good. I mean, Tyler Shuck was a second-rounder this year. Last year, they took Kool-Aid in round 2, who they're expecting to be a starter this year. Foskey was 3 seasons ago. Before that, it was Alontae Taylor, who last year was out of position playing boundary corner, but they needed him there. He's more of a nickel or a safety. Pete Werner was a second-round pick. Eric McCoy was a second-round pick. You got starters in round 2, which you should. If you're drafting round 2, you should be drafting starters in round 2. Marcus Williams back in 2017. Michael Thomas, Von Bell were second-rounders. So you've had a lot of success really going back to 2016, drafting in round 2. Foskey is this big, light bulb flashing outlier, a guy that was just a complete whiff. But what's so interesting is actually before that run started with Von Bell, it was really bad for a long time. You can go back to Tracy Porter, who was taken in round. I'm not trying to give you a historical lesson. It's just sort of an interesting fact. I'll get back to the present in a second. But they drafted Tracy Porter out of Indiana in round 2 back in 2008. They didn't have a second rounder in 2009. They drafted Charles Brown out of USC in round 2 in 2010. It was a total bust. Then they went 3 years without a second-round pick. They didn't have a second-round pick in 11, 12, or 13. Then in 14, they took Stanley Jean-Baptiste, who was cut entering his second year. And then in 15, they took Haole Kikaha, which was an absolute abomination. And arguably that 2015 draft is the worst draft in the history of the NFL. And I say all of that because I think one of my big contentions on this team, the thing that I'm looking for, is I want to see if these draft picks, this draft class, where you took 9 players, if this draft class can become the core of what we hope will be the next contending era for the New Orleans Saints. Now, I tie that into 2015 because this is the most players the Saints have drafted since 2015. And that 2015 draft class might be the worst that the Saints have ever had. 2015 and 2020. The 2020 class, they only took 4 players. Cesar Ruiz, Zach Bond, Adam Troutman, Tommy Stevens. That was it. Ruiz has been a starter, but he's probably been one of the worst starting offensive guards in the NFL. We know what happened with Bond. Never found a home here. Goes to Philly. He's NFL Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Troutman never panned out. He's now in Denver. And Tommy Stevens didn't even make the team as a rookie. So that draft class was almost a total wash. 2015, I'll remind you of this exercise in futility. Andrus Peat was your first-round pick. You took Stephon Anthony with your second first-round pick that year. I mentioned Hau'oli Kikaha in round 2, Garrett Grayson in round 3, along with P.J. Williams, Davis Tull, Tyler Davison, Damian Swann, and Marcus Murphy. 9 players, and that was a whole lot of suck. Point is, what I keep repeating over and over again is for the Saints who are hitting the reset button right now, for this to work for the organization, they got to hit on these draft picks. And it's pretty clear right now that they missed on Isaiah Foskey. He's going into year 3, and when you look at what they have right now at pass rusher, obviously you spent money to re-sign Chase Young this offseason. You got Carl Granderson under a big contract you signed him to. Cam Jordan's at the end of his career, but obviously he's going to be on the team. That's 3. And after that, you're looking at a guy like Chris Rumph, who played for Brandon Staley in L.A. with the Chargers and has been really good. Was really good against the Chargers on Sunday. He's 26 years old. You went and signed Jonathan Bullard as well as a free agent. He's 31, but that's an experienced veteran NFL player. Jasheen Davis has turned some heads. You also drafted Fadil Diggs. They're both 23 years old. So you get some young guys there in the mix as well. But what you really have to have happen in order to make this reset work is hit on these rookies, because you have these guys for 4 or 5 seasons on their rookie contract. That allows you to reset your salary cap and all the quote unquote cap hell we've talked about for a decade and a half now. But it allows you to reset that. And by 2027, Saints will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $130 million under the cap with money to spend. So fantastic news as you project ahead to 2027. But for it all to work, you can't have Isaiah Foskey happen again. You can't take a guy in round 2 and have him give you nothing over 2 seasons and then effectively not make the team, which is what they're aiming for right here. I mean, this draft class from this year with Banks, who you hope is going to be your franchise left tackle, Shuck, who, fingers crossed, knock on wood, you hope is your franchise quarterback, Vernon Broughton, who kind of fits the mold of what Bo Davis wants on the interior of a defensive line. Jonas Sanker was one of your highest graded players from this preseason game this past weekend by PFF. Could be a contributing safety. Danny Stutzman played a ton this past weekend, all over the field. Maybe he's the heir apparent to Demario Davis. Can Quincy Riley be a boundary corner for you? Devin Neal, when he gets healthy, is he a guy that can make the team? I don't know what to expect out of the 7th-round picks and Maliki Matavao and Fadil Diggs. You got Diggs here, and you brought in Jeremiah Martin here as a defensive end. I'm not telling you that signing Jeremiah Martin is gonna be a franchise changer. I mean, that's a guy who I think is really going to struggle even to make this roster. But what it goes to show you is they're looking for options outside of Isaiah Foskey. There's just no other way to say it. This is a 2nd-round pick that's going completely belly up. You hope to get starters in round 2, and instead you got a guy that barely contributed for 2 seasons and now likely isn't going to make the team in year 3. The biggest whiff in the 2nd round since Stanley Jean-Baptiste in 2014 and Hau'oli Kikaha in 2015. So the Saints add Jeremiah Martin at defensive end, very likely meaning the end for Isaiah Foskey, barring some dramatic turnaround in the next 2 weeks. And the corresponding move I should mention was Hunter Dekkers, the quarterback. This is the 2nd time now he's been waived in this offseason. So that's just the game that they're going to play as they need roster space as they continue juggling their roster. Dekkers will likely be the guy that they cut and sign and cut and sign. And when you do it once or twice and he doesn't get picked up after you waive him, it's just pretty clear that you're going to have that flexibility with him to be able to waive him whenever you need a roster spot to bring someone on. And then inevitably there will be another corresponding move somewhere that someone's gone. And then if someone's injured or gone or cut or whatever it is, and then you bring Dekkers back. So they probably gave him his pink slip and said, don't go too far because we're probably going to call you here in another week or so. But in any event, Hunter Dekkers waived, Jeremiah Martin signed, and the bigger news there probably is what the implication is for Isaiah Foskey. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.